The lights flickered aboard the research vessel Horizon as Dr. Jack Stone worked late in his lab. The ship hummed quietly, drifting through the dark space of the outer rim. Most of the crew had already gone to sleep, leaving the night shift to monitor their course through this unexplored region of space. Jack rubbed his tired eyes, focusing on the alien plant samples he collected from their last planetary stop. The green leaves seemed to glow under his microscope, revealing patterns he'd never seen before in any Earth species. He was so absorbed in his work that he almost missed the first warning alarm. Almost. The sound started low, then grew louder. Red emergency lights began flashing throughout the lab. Jack's head snapped up, his heart racing as the ship's AI announced, "Warning. Unknown life form detected in Cargo Bay 3. All personnel, initiate lockdown procedures." Instead of running to safety like the protocols demanded, Jack grabbed his tablet and research kit. If there was an unknown life form on board, he needed to see it. That's what they were out here for, wasn't it? To discover new species. The corridors were empty as he ran toward Cargo Bay 3. Through the ship's windows, he could see the stars stretching endlessly into the darkness of space. When he reached the cargo bay's observation deck, he found 3 security officers already there, their weapons drawn. "Dr. Stone, you shouldn't be here," Officer Mike said, his voice tight with tension. "This thing, it's like nothing we've ever seen." Jack pushed past them to look through the reinforced window into the cargo bay below. His breath caught in his throat. There, moving between the stored containers with fluid grace, was a creature that seemed to be made of living shadow. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body covered in what looked like black scales that absorbed light. 6 amber eyes glowed in its elongated head, and rows of sharp teeth gleamed whenever it opened its mouth. Its long tail ended in a pointed tip that could probably pierce metal. That's a Night Stalker," Officer Mike whispered, his finger tightening on his trigger. "I thought they were just stories. Space legends to scare new recruits." Jack had heard the stories too. Night Stalkers were supposed to be the most lethal predators in known space. Ships that encountered them never survived to tell the tale. They were intelligent hunters that could break into any vessel, kill entire crews, and disappear without a trace. But something wasn't right about this situation. "Wait," Jack said, holding up his hand as the security team prepared to fire through the window. "Look at its behavior. It's not attacking anything. It's exploring." The creature moved with purpose, examining the cargo containers methodically. It wasn't smashing things or trying to break out. It was studying its environment. "Dr. Stone, these things are killers," Officer Mike argued. "We need to eliminate it before it breaks out and murders us all." But Jack couldn't take his eyes off the Night Stalker. When it turned its head toward the observation window, their eyes met. In that moment, Jack saw something that changed everything. Recognition, intelligence, curiosity. "Lower your weapons," Jack ordered, moving toward the cargo bay door. "Are you insane?" one of the officers shouted. "It'll tear you apart." "No," Jack said firmly. "I don't think it will. Look at its eyes. Really look. That's not a mindless killer. That's a thinking being." Before anyone could stop him, Jack pressed his hand against the bioscanner and opened the cargo bay door. The security team shouted in protest, but he was already stepping inside. The Night Stalker turned to face him, its 6 eyes focusing intently on the human who dared to enter its space. Jack's heart pounded, but he kept his movements slow and deliberate. He raised his empty hands, showing he carried no weapons. "Hello," he said softly. "I'm Jack, and I think there's more to your story than what everyone believes." The creature tilted its head, its amber eyes blinking in sequence. Then, to everyone's amazement, it mimicked Jack's gesture, raising its front limbs to show they were empty too. And that's how the impossible friendship began, not with violence, but with a simple act of trust. As alarms blared and the crew watched in disbelief, a human scientist and the galaxy's most feared predator shared their first moment of understanding. defying millennia of prejudice and fear. The ship's emergency containment system activated without warning. Heavy metal shutters slammed down around Cargo Bay 3, sealing Jack inside with the Night Stalker. Red warning lights flashed as the ship's AI announced, "Containment breach detected. Emergency quarantine protocol initiated. Duration, 72 hours. Jack's tablet lit up with the captain's worried face. "Jack, we can't override the quarantine. The system detected unknown biological particles in the air. You're stuck in there with that thing." The Night Stalker watched the exchange with obvious interest, its 6 amber eyes focusing on the tablet's screen. Jack took a deep breath. "Captain, this might be exactly what we need. 3 days to understand each other. If you survive that long," the captain said grimly, "we'll be monitoring everything. If that creature makes one wrong move." "It won't," Jack said firmly. "I can feel it. This is different." After the captain's image disappeared, Jack turned to face his new roommate. The Night Stalker had settled into a corner, its dark scales shifting colors slightly to match the metal walls. In the better lighting, Jack could see patterns in its scales that looked almost like writing. "Well," Jack said, pulling out his research kit, "we might as well make the most of this. Would you like to learn about each other?" The creature moved forward with surprising grace for its size. It stopped a few feet from Jack and began making complex patterns with its 6 eyes, lighting them up in different sequences. Jack noticed the patterns weren't random. They repeated in specific ways. "You're trying to communicate," he realized. Excitement replaced his lingering fear. He pulled up a basic mathematics program on his tablet and held it out. "Let's start with something universal. Numbers." Over the next few hours, Jack discovered that the Night Stalker was far more intelligent than anyone had imagined. It quickly grasped the concept of human mathematics, using its eye patterns to solve complex equations Jack drew on his tablet. When ship's night came, Jack was too excited to sleep. He watched in amazement as the Night Stalker used its claws to scratch simple geometric shapes into the metal floor, not random marks, but precise mathematical formulas. "You're not just smart," Jack said, studying the markings. "Your species must have its own science, its own civilization. Everything we thought we knew about you was wrong." The Night Stalker responded by creating a new pattern of lights with its eyes. This time, Jack noticed it matched the rhythm of his speech. It was learning human language patterns. By the second day, they had developed a basic way to communicate. The Night Stalker, which Jack started calling Shadow because of its ability to blend with darkness, used combinations of eye patterns and geometric scratches to express ideas. Jack learned that what humans had always seen as hunting was actually Shadow's species' way of learning about other life forms. "You study through observation," Jack said, finally understanding. "The stalking, the hunting, it's all research. You're scientists, just like us." Shadow's eyes pulsed in what Jack now recognized as agreement. The creature moved to the cargo bay's window and pointed at the stars, then made a series of complex eye patterns. "You want to show me something out there?" Jack asked. Shadow nodded, a gesture it had learned from watching Jack. On the third day, just hours before the quarantine would end, Jack made another breakthrough. Shadow had drawn a detailed star map on the floor, marking specific systems with special symbols. Jack realized they were showing him the location of their homeworld and ancient colonies. "Your people are scattered," Jack said softly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're not hunting other species. You're looking for safe places to live." Shadow's eyes dimmed slightly, and Jack recognized the expression of sadness. The creature reached out slowly and placed one clawed hand gently on Jack's shoulder, a gesture of trust that made Jack's eyes water. When the quarantine finally lifted and the doors opened, the security team rushed in with weapons raised. They found Jack and Shadow sitting together on the floor, surrounded by mathematical formulas and star maps, deep in what looked like conversation. "Lower your weapons," Jack said, standing up. I'd like you to meet my friend, and we have an amazing story to tell the galaxy." The security team stared in disbelief as Shadow rose and gave them a perfect human-style bow, proving that sometimes the most dangerous things in the universe are the assumptions we make about others. The Horizon's holographic training room hummed to life as Jack input new commands into the control panel. After a week of basic communication with Shadow, he had convinced the captain to let them use this space for more advanced interaction. The room could create any environment they wanted, making it perfect for their unusual language lessons. "Ready for today's session?" Jack asked, looking up at his towering friend. Shadow's 6 amber eyes blinked in sequence, their way of saying yes. The room transformed around them into a lush alien forest. Jack had recreated it from Shadow's star map drawings, hoping it might help them communicate better. Shadow's scales rippled with excitement at seeing a familiar landscape, even if it was just a hologram. "Computer, begin recording session 12 of Human Night Stalker Communication Study," Jack said. The security team watched nervously from behind the observation window, still not fully trusting the creature they'd been taught to fear. Shadow moved through the holographic trees with incredible grace, stopping to point at specific plants. Each time, their eyes would create different light patterns. Jack recorded each pattern carefully on his tablet. "These aren't just random signals," he muttered, studying the data. "There's a structure here, like grammar." As if understanding, Shadow approached the holographic wall and began drawing symbols with their claws. They matched the eye patterns, but now Jack could see them clearly written out. His excitement grew as he recognized mathematical patterns in the symbols. "Of course," he exclaimed. "You're using mathematical principles to structure your language. Like equations, but for concepts instead of numbers." Shadow's scales shifted to a lighter shade, something Jack had learned meant approval. The creature then did something unexpected. It reached out and gently took Jack's tablet, studying the human writing on the screen. "You want to learn our writing too?" Jack asked. The answer came in a complex series of eye flashes that Jack now understood meant knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. It was the first complete sentence he'd fully understood in Shadow's language. Over the next few hours, they worked together in the holographic forest. Shadow would point to something, show the eye pattern, draw the symbol, and Jack would write the English word. They created a basic dictionary, moving from simple objects to more complex ideas. The breakthrough came when they reached the concept of hunt. Shadow's eye pattern showed the familiar sequence humans had always interpreted as aggression. But now, with the added context of their mathematical language, Jack understood it differently. "Wait," he said, studying the pattern. "Your word for hunt is the same pattern as learn, just with an added sequence that means through experience." Shadow's eyes pulsed brightly, their equivalent of excitement. They quickly drew more symbols, building on this revelation. "So when your people track other species," Jack said slowly, "you're not hunting for food. You're learning through observation, through experience, through," he paused, finding the right word, "through pursuit of knowledge." The security team behind the window murmured in surprise as Shadow began drawing rapidly on the holographic walls, filling them with complex mathematical equations mixed with their species' written language. Jack's tablet worked overtime, translating the patterns they'd documented. "This is incredible," Jack said, reading the translations. "Your species doesn't see hunting as violence. It's your way of scientific research. You study through careful observation and controlled interaction. That's why you've been watching other species across the galaxy." Shadow's next series of eye patterns told a deeper story. Their people had been researchers and scientists for thousands of years, but fear and misunderstanding had turned the galaxy against them. They couldn't just walk up to other species to learn about them. The mere sight of a night stalker caused panic. "But humans are different," Jack said, understanding now. "We might be the first species that stopped to look past appearances and actually try to understand you." Shadow reached out and drew one final symbol on the wall. Jack recognized it immediately. It was their mathematical symbol for hope. The holographic forest faded away, leaving teacher and student standing together in the empty training room. But they weren't just teacher and student anymore. They were proof that understanding could bridge any gap, break any barrier, and overcome any fear. As they left the training room together, the security team stood at attention. Not out of fear now, but respect. Word was spreading through the ship. The galaxy's deadliest predator wasn't a monster after all, but a scientist, an explorer, and now, a friend. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council towered above Jack as he stood before the semicircle of alien representatives. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into darkness, and the walls glowed with soft blue light. Shadows stood beside him, their dark scales reflecting the chamber's light in subtle waves. "This is madness," boomed Council Leader Red Rock, his stone-like face cracking with anger. "You bring a Night Stalker into these sacred chambers. Have you lost your mind, human?" Jack stood his ground, though his heart raced. Hundreds of alien species watched from the surrounding seats, their whispers filling the massive room. Most had never seen a Night Stalker up close, only in warning messages and horror stories. "Honorable Council," Jack said, his voice clear and strong. "For thousands of years, we've all been wrong about the Night Stalkers. They're not mindless killers. They're scientists, just like us." "Scientists," laughed a blue-skinned council member. "They've destroyed hundreds of ships, killed thousands of our people." Shadow's eyes began their patterned speech, and Jack translated for the council. "They say those were misunderstandings. When your ships attacked out of fear, they defended themselves. But their real purpose was to learn, to study, to understand." "Lies," shouted another council member. "Guard units, remove this creature at once." Armed guards moved forward from all sides, their weapons pointed at Shadow. Jack stepped in front of his friend, arms spread wide. "If you'd just listen." A flash of movement caught Jack's eye. In the shadows above, something shifted. Shadow saw it too, all 6 eyes focusing upward. Before Jack could react, a dark figure dropped from the ceiling, energy blade aimed straight at him. What happened next changed everything. Shadow moved with incredible speed, but not to attack. Their large body curved around Jack, forming a living shield. The energy blade struck Shadow's scales and bounced off harmlessly. In one fluid motion, Shadow caught the assassin with their tail, disarming them without causing injury. The Great Hall erupted in chaos. Guards rushed forward, but stopped short when they saw Shadow gently place the would-be killer on the ground, then stepped back to check if Jack was unhurt. "Don't you see?" Jack said into the stunned silence that followed. "Shadow just proved everything I've been saying. They protected me. They didn't kill the assassin. They used exactly the right amount of force to handle the situation." Council Leader Red Rock leaned forward, his stone features shifting in thought. "The human speaks truth. We all saw it. This Night Stalker showed both intelligence and restraint." Jack pressed his advantage. "The Night Stalkers have been trying to communicate with other species for centuries, but everyone was too afraid to listen. Humans were the first to try understanding instead of fighting." Shadow's eyes created a complex pattern, which Jack had learned well enough to translate without hesitation. "They say their species has watched humanity since we first reached the stars. They saw how we tried to understand new things instead of just fearing them. That's why they chose my ship for first contact." The blue-skinned council member stood up. "But what about all our records? The attacks, the deaths?" "Show them," Jack said to Shadow. "Show them what you showed me." Shadow moved to the center of the chamber and began creating intricate eye patterns while drawing mathematical symbols in the air, their holographic technology far more advanced than anything the council had seen. The symbols formed a 3-dimensional star map, showing thousands of years of contact between species. "Every dot you see," Jack explained, "is not an attack, but an attempt at scientific contact. The Night Stalkers were trying to learn about us, just as we try to learn about the galaxy. Fear turned first contact into conflict. Again and again. The council chambers grew quiet as the members studied the display. Finally, Council Leader Red Rock spoke again, his voice softer than before. Perhaps we have been blind. But what do we do with this new understanding? Jack smiled. That's why we're here. Shadow's people don't want war or conquest. They want what all scientists want, to learn, to share knowledge, to understand. They're asking for peace and the chance to finally talk openly with other species. As the council members whispered among themselves, Shadow placed one large hand gently on Jack's shoulder, a gesture of friendship that made even the most doubtful observers pause and reconsider everything they thought they knew about the galaxy's most feared species. The impossible was happening. Centuries of fear were giving way to the first rays of understanding, all because one human had chosen to look past appearances and find the truth. The ancient library beneath the Galactic Council chambers was dark and dusty. Jack's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating rows of data crystals that hadn't been touched in centuries. Shadow moved silently beside him, their scales almost invisible in the darkness. The council clerk said the oldest records about your species should be here, Jack said, checking his tablet's map. Before they were sealed away, Shadow's eyes flickered in a pattern that Jack now understood meant deep worry. After their presentation to the council, Shadow had shared a disturbing theory. Someone had deliberately erased their species' true history. They reached a sealed door marked with warning symbols. Jack pressed his hand against the scanner, his new council access card working its magic. The door creaked open, revealing a small room filled with ancient technology. "Look at this," Jack whispered, picking up a dusty data crystal. He slotted it into his modified tablet, and holographic images sprang to life in the air around them. The images showed Night Stalkers, but not as hunters or killers. They were standing in great cities, working alongside other alien species. In one image, a Night Stalker was teaching mathematics to a group of young aliens from different worlds. "This can't be right," Jack said, checking the date stamp. "This is from over 10,000 years ago. The council records say your people were discovered just 2,000 years ago." Shadow's eye patterns became intense, urgent. They reached for another crystal, this one showing something that made Jack's breath catch. It was a peace ceremony. Night Stalkers and dozens of other species signing what looked like a treaty. The date stamped showed it was from 8,000 years ago. "Someone tried to erase your history," Jack said slowly, anger building in his voice. "They didn't want anyone to know that your people were once part of galactic society." They spent hours going through more crystals, piecing together the truth. The Night Stalkers had been one of the first species to achieve space travel. They had helped many younger species learn and grow, sharing their knowledge of mathematics and science. Then they found it, the crystal that explained everything. Jack's hands shook as he played the recording. A younger-looking council leader, not Red Rock but someone from the same stone-like species, spoke to a private meeting. "The Night Stalkers' power grows too great. Their ability to learn, to adapt, to understand other species, it makes them dangerous. They could rule us all if they wanted to. We must act now, while we still can." Shadow's eyes dimmed with sadness as they watched the recording continue. The old council had launched a secret campaign against their people. Not with weapons, but with fear. They spread false stories, turned every peaceful contact into a tale of horror, until the galaxy saw Night Stalkers as nothing but monsters. "Your people didn't turn violent," Jack said, understanding at last. "You were pushed into hiding. Every time you tried to make contact, to rebuild relationships, the council made sure it ended in fear and violence." Shadow drew symbols in the dust on an old table. Jack read them aloud. "We did not change. The galaxy changed around us. We kept trying to teach, to learn, to understand. But fear is stronger than truth when truth is buried." Jack stood up, determination in his eyes. Not anymore. We have proof now. The Council can't deny their own historical records. But as he reached for another crystal, alarms suddenly blared through the library. Red lights flashed, and heavy doors began closing. "Someone knows we're here," Jack said, quickly grabbing as many crystals as he could. "They're trying to bury the truth again." Shadow moved swiftly, wrapping their tail around Jack's waist and pulling him toward the exit. They navigated the dark corridors with perfect vision, avoiding the security systems that were activating all around them. Just before they reached the main level, Jack heard voices ahead. Armed guards, probably ordered to stop them from leaving with the evidence. Shadow's eyes created a pattern Jack had never seen before. He understood anyway. "Trust me." Jack nodded, holding the crystals tight against his chest. "Always, my friend." Together, human and Night Stalker, they prepared to face whatever waited above. The truth about their people's past was too important to stay buried any longer, no matter what dangers they had to face to reveal it. The Earth's conference hall buzzed with tension. Representatives from every major human colony sat around the massive table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. Jack stood at the front, Shadow beside him, facing the most important audience of their lives. "I know what I'm asking sounds impossible," Jack said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "But Earth has a chance to make history here." The United Earth President leaned forward, her eyes moving between Jack and Shadow. "You want us to offer sanctuary to the species that every other civilization fears. The political risks alone." "With respect, Madam President," Jack interrupted, holding up one of the ancient data crystals they'd rescued from the Council library. "That fear was built on lies." He activated the crystal, and the room filled with holograms showing the true history of the Night Stalkers. The assembled leaders gasped as they saw the ancient peace treaties, the joint scientific missions, the proof that humans weren't the first to see past the fearsome appearance of Shadow's people. "They were teachers once," Jack explained, "helping younger species understand the universe, until fear and prejudice drove them into hiding." Shadow's eyes created patterns that Jack had taught many of the human leaders to understand. "We seek not to rule, but to return to our true purpose, learning, teaching, growing together." One of the colony governors spoke up, her voice concerned. "But where would they live? Our colonies are already crowded, and people would panic if Night Stalkers suddenly appeared in their cities." Jack smiled. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. He pressed a button on his tablet, and a new hologram appeared. Detailed plans for something unprecedented. "The Mars Research Academy," he announced. "A joint human Night Stalker scientific facility. Mars has plenty of space, and its lower gravity suits the Night Stalker's physiology. It would be a place where both our species could work together, sharing knowledge and technology." The room erupted in discussion. Jack and Shadow watched as the human leaders debated among themselves. Some were excited by the potential scientific advances, others worried about safety and public reaction. "There's more," Jack said, his voice cutting through the noise. He nodded to Shadow, who stepped forward and activated their own holographic display. The technology was far more advanced than anything humans had seen before. "This is Night Stalker terraforming technology," Jack explained as beautiful images of transformed Martian landscapes appeared. "They can help us make Mars more habitable, faster than we ever thought possible. All they ask in return is a chance to rebuild their civilization in peace, alongside humanity." The president stood up slowly, studying the plans. "The other species won't like this. The Galactic Council will see it as a threat." "Let them," said Jack firmly. "Humanity has always prided itself on doing what's right, not what's easy. We can show the galaxy a better way forward." Shadow moved to the center of the room and began drawing complex mathematical symbols in the air, equations showing how their technologies could work together, how both species could benefit. "Look at what we've already learned from each other in just a few months," Jack said, gesturing to the equations. "Imagine what we could accomplish in years, in decades." A young colony leader raised her hand. I have a question for Shadow. She used the eye pattern for friend that Jack had taught them. Why choose humans? Why trust us? Shadow's response lit up the room with complex patterns that Jack translated. Because when the galaxy saw monsters, you saw potential. When others ran in fear, you reached out in friendship. You remind us of who we once were before fear changed everything. You give us hope that we can be that again. The room fell silent. The president walked slowly around the table, studying the plans, the equations, the ancient historical records. Finally, she turned to face Jack and Shadow. If we do this, she said carefully, we change everything. Not just Mars, not just Earth. The entire balance of power in the galaxy shifts. Jack nodded. Yes, but isn't that what humanity does best? We change things. We make the impossible possible. We take risks to build a better future. The president smiled slightly. Then let's make history. She extended her hand to Shadow, who gently took it in their larger one. Welcome to the solar system. As the room erupted in applause, Jack watched his friend's eyes glow with a pattern he'd never seen before. He didn't need to translate it to understand. It was the light of hope, reborn after thousands of years of darkness. The Martian sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and orange as Jack stood at the observation window of the newly completed Mars Research Academy. 1 year had passed since the historic agreement between humans and Night Stalkers, and the changes were more dramatic than anyone had imagined. Below him, the transformed Martian landscape stretched out in all directions. Where there had once been only red dust, now gardens of Earth and Night Stalker plants grew together in specially designed biodomes. The Night Stalkers' terraforming technology had already created small lakes and weather systems that scientists had thought would take centuries to establish. Still admiring the view, Shadow's familiar eye patterns glowed in the dimming light as they joined Jack at the window. Their scales shifted colors slightly to match the sunset. Every day, Jack replied, smiling. Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come. A small group of human and Night Stalker children passed by the window, headed to the Academy's Learning Center. The human children showed no fear of their tall, dark classmates, and the young Night Stalkers had learned to move carefully around their smaller friends. They were the first generation to grow up knowing the truth, that friendship could exist between any species if you just gave it a chance. Professor Jack, one of the human children, called out, waving excitedly. Look what Shadow's daughter taught us. The child held up a mathematical equation that would have puzzled most adult humans. Jack recognized it as part of the Night Stalker's space navigation system. Knowledge that had once been kept secret out of fear, now freely shared with young students. Director Stone, a voice called from behind them. Jack turned to see one of his human assistants hurrying toward him with a tablet. The latest results from the Joint Genetics Project just came in. The Galactic Council representatives are asking for an immediate meeting. Jack and Shadow exchanged knowing looks. Word of their success had spread throughout the galaxy. Other species were beginning to question the old stories about Night Stalkers. Some had even requested to send their own scientists to the Academy. They made their way to the conference room, where holographic representatives from various council worlds waited. Jack noticed that even Red Rock, once their fierce opponent, seemed less stern than usual. The results are extraordinary, one of the council scientists said, their holographic form flickering slightly. The combination of human adaptability and Night Stalker biological knowledge. You've solved problems we've struggled with for centuries. That's what happens when we work together instead of fearing each other, Jack said simply. Every species has something to teach and something to learn. Shadow stepped forward, their eye patterns creating the complex symbols that most council members could now understand. We offer this knowledge freely to all who wish to learn. As we did in the ancient days, we seek only to understand and to share understanding. The council members murmured among themselves. Finally, Red Rock spoke. We have been discussing changes to certain council policies. Perhaps it is time to officially acknowledge the true history of the Night Stalker species and to consider allowing them representation on the council itself. Jack felt his heart leap. This was what they had hoped for, not just acceptance, but true recognition, a chance for Shadow's people to reclaim their place in galactic society. Later that evening, Jack found himself back at the observation window. The Martian moons hung in the dark sky, and the lights of the academy created a warm glow across the transformed landscape. Shadow joined him again, this time accompanied by their mate and young daughter. The young Night Stalker was trying to teach herself to write human letters, her claws carefully drawing in a datapad. She looked up at Jack with bright, curious eyes, the same look of intelligence and friendship he had seen in Shadow's eyes that first day on the horizon. "To think," Jack said softly, "everyone used to believe Night Stalkers were the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." Shadow's eyes created a pattern that Jack knew meant laughter. Their daughter tried to copy the pattern, but got it slightly wrong, making both adults chuckle. "Perhaps we were dangerous." Shadow's pattern speech glowed. Dangerous to ignorance, dangerous to fear, dangerous to the idea that different means deadly. Jack watched as more academy students walked past, humans and Night Stalkers together, sharing stories and ideas. In the distance, a new research tower rose toward the Martian sky, a beacon of hope for the entire galaxy. "That's the kind of dangerous the universe needs," Jack said, smiling at his friend. And it all started because one human and one Night Stalker decided to trust instead of fear. Shadow's eyes glowed with the pattern for friendship, the first word they had ever taught the humans. In its light, the future seemed brighter than ever.